Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are not just talking about a regulatory update. We are talking about a shift in how computerized systems are expected to be controlled, a system in how validation is performed, and honestly, a shift in how companies will need to think about compliance moving forward. Annex 11 hasn't changed significantly since 2011, but technology has changed dramatically. Cloud, SaaS, hybrid systems, AI, microservices, remote access. The draft is the regulator saying, we see how digital you've become. Now show us how you can control it. So today we walk to three things. What is changing, what it really means in practice, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself as a moderator. Um, could you please change this? Okay, thank you. I'm Lilian Ribeiro, a chemical engineer and biomedical system technologist with a postgraduate degree in integrated management system and lead auditor certification. I also hold an MBA in data science and business analytics, which is very aligned with today's topic. I have more than 10 years of experience in food, pharmaceutical, and healthcare industries, working both technically and commercially. I'm an advocate of paperless validation and digital transformation in life sciences. So this topic is close to my heart. I have hands-on experience with digital validation, ERP system, EQMS, automation projects, IT infrastructure qualification in regulated environments. So I'm happy to moderate this discussion today. Now I'll hand it over to my partner, CEO and founder of Five Validation, who will introduce herself and lead the presentation. I'll be back later to moderate and help address your questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lilian. For those of who you don't know me yet, I'm Silvia Martins. I'm a Brazilian electrical engineer specializing in industrial automation, and I've been living in the Netherlands for the past years. I've been working in life science for more than 23 years across validation, IT, and OT systems, compliance, and digital transformation. My main areas of expertise are computer system validation, GAMP 5, FDA 21 CFR Part 11, and data integrity. I've worked with both IT and OT systems in regulated environments. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Five Validation and the visionary behind Go5, our digital validation platform designed to bring agility, traceability, and structured life science control into compliance. I also lead Five Academy, where we focus on modern validation approaches, especially for digital and AI-based systems. I've been an ISP volunteer for over 20 years, and I've had the privilege of training more than 100 visa inspectors in Brazil. And outside the regulatory world, I am also involved in social impact initiatives that support more than 1,400 children daily. But today, I'm here in one role to help you understand what this Annex 11 draft really changes and how to prepare for it in a pragmatic way. So before we begin, just a quick note, don't worry, we will share the material with everyone. So let's look at the regulatory context. The Annex 11 draft revision was published in July 2025 for public comment. And this is not a minor adjustment. This is a major overhaul, a general review of the computerized systems section. Annex 11 was written in a very different technological reality. In 2011, cloud adoption was limited, SaaS was not dominant, AI was not embedded in regulated systems. Today, the digital landscape is completely different. This revision aligns Annex 11 with modern digital environments and stronger risk-based expectations. This is also complemented by revisions to Chapter 4 and the introduction of Annex 22, which addresses AI. So this is not an isolated update. This is part of a broader modernization of GMP expectations. And why does this matter? Because regulators are saying if your systems have evolved, your control over them must evolve as well. When we look at the CSV regulatory landscape globally, there is an interesting difference between regions. Personally, I believe that for many European companies, one of the biggest challenges is not what Annex 11 requires, but how exactly it should be implemented in practices. And here is why. Regulation defines what must be done. Guidance documents help explain how to do it. In Brazil, for example, the regulatory agency, Anvisa, which is a member of PIX and ICH, both international collaboration groups, developed a specific guide document to help companies comply with the computerized system requirements. I had the opportunity to coordinate the working group that developed the first Brazilian guidance back in 2010. At that time, even regulators were still defining how inspections would be conducted. So the guide was created not only for regulated industry, but also for inspectors. That was positive. The Brazilian guidance was based in quality by design principles and aligned with GAMP 5. So risk-based validation, lifecycle thinking, and the continuous update have been embedded in that regulatory environment for many years. In the United States, the FDA also provided guidance documents supporting computerized system validation. Not structured like GAMP 5, but enough to give direction and clarity to the industry. In Europe, however, there was not been an official detailed implementation guide issued by regulators, specifically for Annex 11, only for electronic data, but not how to validate GXP system. The closest reference to filling that gap is GAMP 5, which is an excellent guide, but it is a paid document. Not every company acquires it. Some organizations may not even be aware of its importance. So in this context, it can become a challenge for companies to interpret inspector expectations and translate Annex 11 into practical implementation steps. And this becomes even more relevant now with the draft revision increasing prospectiveness. So why is Annex 11 being revised? The simple answer is the world changed and the risk changed. First, we've had an increase in digital technologies, cloud, SaaS, hybrid systems, and far more connectivity than we had in 2011. Second, computerized systems are no longer supporting tools. They are critical parts of the product quality and patient safety. Third, there is much stronger focus now in that integrity, lifecycle management, and the risk-based control not only at the start of the project, but during operation, changes, and the upgrades. And finally, the draft makes something clear. Regulators don't want only principles anymore. They want expectations that are explicit. And here is the key insight. This is not cosmetic. So the message is, if your technology is modern, your control needs to be modern too. Now, let's take a look at the changes. So the first thing that stands out is the expansion. Annex 11 goes from 5 pages to 19 pages. That alone already tell us something. Expectations are becoming more detailed and more explicit. But it's not just longer. It's more about prescriptive. And the revised Annex 11 introduces clear lifecycle management expectations. It now includes supplier management, identity and access management, or IAM, security controls, and audit trails requirements. And something very important, that integrity principles are no longer isolated topics that are integrated throughout the entire document. So instead of scattered or dispersed principles, we now see a structured framework of control expectations. This is a shift from high-level guidance to lifecycle-driven control. To simplify everything, we've just seen we can group the revision into 5 major thematic changes. First, lifecycle and the risk-based expectations. Validation is no longer a phase. It's a continual lifecycle control model. Second, stronger and clear data integrity requirements, not just policies, but system-embedded controls. Third, security, identity, and access management and technical controls. IAM is no longer IT responsibility only. It's a GMP control. Fourth, vendor and cloud oversight. When you see a SaaS solution, regulatory responsibility remains with your company, not the supplier, before the regulatory authority. And the fifth, inspection-ready documentation. The draft positions companies to be able to demonstrate control at any time, not only prepare for inspection when it's announced. These 5 areas together represent the shift in Annex 11. And now we go deeper into each one. This is where the shift happens. Annex 11 moves from high-level guidance to lifecycle control. What does it mean in practice? It means risk management is now expected through all phases of the system lifecycle, not only at the beginning, not only during validation, but during operation, changes, upgrades, and retirement. It also means documented requirements from concept to retirement. The entire life cycle must be traceable and controlled. And the integration of QRM according to IC8Q9 is no longer optional or isolated. Risk must be embedded across phases. And here's the impact on validation. Validation is not a one-time event. It is not a project. It must reflect on ongoing risk control and lifecycle governance. If validation stops after go live, it is no longer aligned with the direction of Annex 11. And this is the main change.
Silvia,
Yeah.
I can hear the microphone hitting your necklace.
I don't know why it happens. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to do this way. Thank you, Lily. Is it better now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sometimes I get excited with the subject that I like a lot. Now we will see the phrase a lot in the draft: lifecycle governance and continuous assurance. Let me translate that into simple words. It means you must control the system from idea to retirement, and you must keep controlling it while it's running. So validation is not something you do once, write a report, and put it in a folder. It's more like a loop. You build, you assess risk, you test, you release, and then you keep monitoring, managing changes, and keeping the validated state. That's why I like this visual. Each sprint delivers something new, but change management connects everything. So the key question becomes, do you know a structured way to keep traceability and evidence as the system evolves? Because in real life, systems change all the time. Now let's talk about data integrity. The draft reinforces something important. Handling of data is no longer just about documentation. It's about how the system itself protects and manages data. There is an emphasis on integrity controls beyond paper, especially in a hybrid environment where part is digital and part is manual. The draft also strengthens expectation around metadata, audit trails, and tamper resistance, encryption where applicable, protection in transit, secure use credentials. So what does this really mean? It means control must live inside the system, not only in SOPs, not only in policies, not only in training. If the system allows manipulation without detection, procedures will not save you. That integrity must be technically supported. Now this one is one of the most important shifts. Identity and Access Management, or IAM, is now positioned as a GMP control. Let me say that again. IAM is not just an IT configuration topic. It is a GMP requirement. Access must be role-based. It must follow the principle of least privilege. Users should only have access to what they need. So regular access reviews must be performed and documented. And for remote or critical access, stronger controls like multi-factor authentication and session controls are expected. So what is the impact? IAM is no longer IT job. It becomes part of the quality system, which means QA must understand it. Validation must verify it. And the companies must be able to demonstrate it during inspection. Now let's talk about audit trails. Many companies say, yes, we have audit trails, but the draft goes further than that. Logs must be immutable, they must be searchable, they must be reviewable. It is not enough that the system generates them. You must be able to use them. The draft also reinforces risk-based review, especially before critical decisions such as batch release. So the question becomes, are audit trails reviewed or only stored? And finally, systems must have the capability to export and demonstrate integrity when required. This is important during inspections. So what changes here? Audit trail management moves from passive availability to proactive inspection readiness. That's the main shift. Everything we discussed so far leads to one central point: inspection readiness. The draft positions clear expectations around what companies must be able to demonstrate. Lifecycle documentation and evidence, documented audit trail reviews, data integrity and IAM evidence, vendor oversight records. Second, security controls and even incident management evidence. This is not theory. It's not theory. Inspector will expect to see this. And here's the shift. Inspection readiness moves from reactive, let's extract documents because an inspection is coming, to proactive. You must be able to show risk-based controls at any time, not rebuild them, show them. That's a different level of maturity. Now let's talk about suppliers and cloud services. This is relevant today. The draft makes something clear. You must formally document roles, responsibilities, and service expectations. That means clarity about who does what. It also means SLAs and KPIs must align with the GMP outcomes, not only IT performance. Availability is important, but compliance is critical. Vendors must be qualified, integrated into your quality system. Assessment is no longer optional. And here is the practical note. Cloud and SaaS solutions are permitted. The draft does not prohibit them, but responsibility remains with the regulated company, not the vendor. If something fails, the regulator will not inspect your supplier first. They will inspect you. So oversight and the risk control cannot be outsourced. So what does all of these mean for validation? There are some shifts. First, validation must support continuous assurance, not just initial qualification. Second, risk and compliance in lifecycle data become essential evidence. You must be able to demonstrate not only that you validated, but that you are continuously controlling risk. Third, emerging technologies like APIs, microservices, and machine learning must be controlled. Innovation is welcome, but control must evolve with it. And here's the key message. Traditional document-centric validation alone is no longer sufficient. Lifecycle management and continuous controls are required. And this does not mean documentation disappears. It means documentation must reflect ongoing control, not just a past event. And this is an important difference. Now let's talk about modern digital technologies. Annex 11 itself does not regulate AI, but the related Annex 22 introduces expectations that are relevant. For example, AI and machine learning models must be explainable, their performance must be measurable, workflows in regulated environments must remain transparent. And perhaps most importantly, model behavior must be continuously monitored. So what does this mean? IT means AI cannot be treated like a black box. If you adopt AI, you must justify it, control it, and monitor it. And organizations moving into AI must align compliance strategies with both Annex 11 and Annex 22. Innovation is encouraged, but accountability is mandatory. If this topic is relevant to you, especially AI, we've created practical materials to help support you. We have a detailed blog on how to validate AI in regulated environments. We also published content on data governance for AI, which is becoming critical. So we have an on-demand webinar that goes deeper into validating AI and machine learning life science. All of these resources are available through the links and the QR codes here. So our goal is simple, to help organizations move from uncertainty to structured, controlled innovation. Because AI adoption without validation strategies can become a compliance risk. But AI adoption with lifecycle control becomes a competitive advantage. One message in the draft is about governance. Technology alone is not enough. The revision emphasizes clear roles across IT, QA, validation, and data governance. And it's not just defined on paper, but working together. There is also emphasis on accountability at all levels, from process owner and system owners to users, SME, subject matter experts, QA, IT, vendors, and service providers. Leadership involvement is also expected. This is not something delegated only to operational teams. And importantly, governance must be integrated into the pharmaceutical quality system. Computerized systems are not separated from PQS. They are part of it. And when governance is structured this way, it supports a consistent, risk-based control environment, which reduces inspection surprises. So what should companies do now? Before the final version is published, there are practical steps that you can already take. First, conduct a gap assessment against the draft. Understand where you are today and where the expectations are moving. Second, review and update your SOPs, lifecycle processes, and technical controls. Make sure they reflect the continuous assurance, not only initial validation. Third, enhance governance and the risk documentation. Risk thinking must be visible, documented, and consistent. Fourth, strengthen supplier and cloud oversight programs. Clarify roles, review SLAs, align vendors with GMP expectations, and finally prepare evidence trails for data integrity and IAM. Don't wait for the inspection to discover gaps. The focus areas going forward are clear: continuous assurance, inspection readiness, and alignment with modern technologies. Companies that start preparing now will transition much more smoothly when the final version is enforced. Now let's be honest. Why does traditional validation struggle with this new draft? First, manual lifecycle traceability is difficult. When documentation is managed in separated files, spreadsheets, or in folders, maintaining real-time traceability becomes complex. Second, audit trail review evidence is often fragmented. Logs may exist, but the review evidence is scattered across emails, screenshots, and meeting notes. Third, IAM documentation is usually split between IT and QA. IT manages access technically, QA documents compliance expectations. But the evidence is not always integrated. It is often treated as a separate activity. And finally, continuous assurance cannot be supported by static documentation. If your validation model is built around fixed reports and frozen documents, it becomes hard to demonstrate ongoing lifecycle control. So what happens? If processes remain document-centric, the Annex 11 draft will increase operational burden, more controls, more reviews, more documentation. Without structural change, complexity increases. In the material we are going to share with you, we described a common risk scenario. In this blog, for example, the editing pre-approved test documents to include execution evidence after the test run. At first glance, this may seem practical, but from a data integrity perspective, this creates an issue. One principle of data integrity is that a document must not be modified after approval without change control. According to GAMP 5 guidance, tests must be executed according to the predefined and the pre-approved specification. And the pre-approval phase, the objective, acceptance criteria, prerequisites, actions, and expected results are reviewed and approved. After execution, the results are recorded and approved. But if you allow modifications to the pre-approved test scripts in order to insert evidence later, you break traceability, you break that integrity. Approving the modification becomes disconnected. And once that happens, you can no longer guarantee that what was executed and what was approved. That is the core data integrity risk. After everything we've discussed, this becomes clear. Traditional validation models are static, file-based, reactive, and difficult to keep inspection ready. They depend on manual coordination, scattered documentation, and periodic reviews. Now compare that with a digital and agile validation approach. Traceable by design, risk-based by structure, item-level control, and built for inspection readiness. The difference is not cosmetic, it is architectural. If the Annex 11 draft increases lifecycle and evidence expectations, then the real question is not whether to digitalize validation. It is how to digitalize it in a controlled and inspection-ready way. Digital lifecycle control means evidence is generated within the process, traceability is automatic, risk management is embedded, inspection readiness is continuous. And that changes their operational burden completely. Now let's make this practical. Instead of discussing the drafting theory, let's map expectations to operational reality. If Annex 11 requires lifecycle governance, the operational challenge is traceability gaps. The solution must be a digital lifecycle workflow. If the draft reinforces risk-based validation, the challenge becomes inconsistent justification and scattered risk documentation. The solution must include built-in risk libraries and structured risk linkage to requirements and testing. If IAM is now a GMP control, the operational issue is the disconnect between IT, OT, and QA. The solution must provide structured IAM validation templates and evidence management. If inspector expect document evidence of implemented controls, the challenge is fragmented proof. The solution must allow item-level test packs so evidence is connected to each requirement, not buried in attachments. If supplier oversights become more explicit, vendor evidence cannot remain dispersed across emails and folders. It must be integrated into the validation structure. And finally, continuous assurance is required. Static documentation will not support it. ongoing digital validation control becomes essential. So this is not about software, it's about architecture. It's about aligning validation operations with the regulatory direction. So we summarized everything in one slide. The EMA draft is increasing prescriptive this word is hard, prescriptiveness. So it's very prescriptive. And it is elevating identity and access management to a formal GMP control. It's formalizing lifecycle governance, and it's strengthening inspection expectations. This is not a minor update. This is a structural evolution in how computerized the system must be controlled. And this context, digital lifecycle validation is no longer a nice to have. It becomes an enabler of traceability, enabler of continuous assurance, enabler of inspection readiness. The question is not whether expectations will increase. They already have. The question is whether your validation architecture is ready. Yeah. So how do we support organizations in this transition? First, through Go5, our digital validation SaaS platform. It enables lifecycle control, embedded risk management, item-level traceability, and the continuous inspection readiness supported by built-in libraries of ready-to-use templates that accelerate the standardized validation activities. Second, through CSV remote service provision using a digital validation approach, we don't just advise, we implement using modern validation architecture aligned with current regulatory direction. And third, through 5 Academy, we train professionals in modern CSV practices, including GAMP 5 second edition, FDA CSA, and AIML integration. Because technology alone is not enough. People must understand the new validation mindset. Our mission is simple, to help organizations move from document-centric validation to controlled digital lifecycle governance. So whether we need platform expertise or training, we are here to support that journey. Let's close with these key takeaways. Annex 11 is becoming more prescriptive and more risk-based. Lifecycle management and data integrity are no longer supporting concepts. There are core regulatory expectations. IAM security and audit trails are now elevated GMP controls. Modern digital environments require explicit governance, not informal practices. The draft makes compliance more structured, more evidence-driven, and more inspection-focused. Any organizations that remain document-centric will experience increasing operational friction. But there is the most important message. Digital lifecycle control is no longer optional. It is an enabler for sustainable compliance. Companies that adapt early will not experience this revision as pressure. They will experience it as alignment. Thank you for your attention. We would be happy to hear your questions, and actually we have them read in the subscriptions. I'd like to invite Lilian to moderate the QA session. Please, Lilian.
Thank you, Sylvia. We've received several questions, so we'll try to answer as many as possible. If your question isn't addressed today, you'll find a QR code or link in the material you will receive, where you can schedule a meeting, and we'll be happy to respond and provide further guidance. Elena asked, is it must and how to be checked the audit trail of the software of the equipment? Sylvia, can you get this first and great question?
Yes, that is a good question. Is it mandatory to review the tray of equipment software? Okay, the short message answer is yes, when the audit trail is relevant to GMP data or critical decisions. Annex 11, the data integrity principle, do not require reviewing every audit trail. What they require is a risk-based approach. If the equipment generates GMP-relevant data, such as batch parameters, critical process data, configuration changes, or use in access modifications, then the audit trail becomes part of your control environment. Now, should it be checked? Again, it should be risk-based.
Okay, thank you. This is one from Gibril. Is the CSA, Computerized System Assurance terminology, could be used? Is it common right now? I can take this one. That's a good question too. CSA, Computerized System Assurance, is a FDA initiative. It originated in the United States as a modernization of traditional computer system validation. So in the US, the term CSA is common and well recognized. However, in Europe, CSA is not a adopted terminology. EMA and EU GMP Annex 11 don't use the term CSA. They continue to refer to validation and risk-based approach. That said, the principles behind CSA, such as risk-based testing, focusing on critical thinking rather than excessive documentation, and leveraging supplier activities, are aligned with the direction we see in the Annex 11 draft. So, can we use the term CSA? Yes, specifically if you operate globally or interact with FDA regulated environments. But in Europe, it's clear to speak in terms of risk-based validation, lifecycle control, evidence-based assurance. In other words, the concept is relevant. The label depends on your regulatory geography. The next question is from Jenny. Connection between draft and FDA CSA that are quite frequently updated. Can you take this one, Sylvia?
Yes. Lilian, I can take this one. It is connected with the one you answered. To clarify, CSA itself is not frequently updated as a formal guidance. The draft was issued in 2022, and the final guidance in 2026 this year, 1 month ago. What evolves continuously is the discussion, interpretation, and the practical application in the industry. There is a conceptual connection between the Annex 11 draft and the FDA CSA initiative. While they come from different regulatory bodies, both are moving in a similar direction. FDA CSA promotes risk-based assurance, critical thinking over excessive documentation, focus on what impacts product quality and patient safety, leveraging supplier documentation when justified. The Annex 11 draft, although it does not use the term CSA, is reinforcing lifecycle governance, risk-based validation, explicit control expectations, evidence and inspection readiness. So the terminology may differ, but the philosophy is converging. Both regulators are shifting away from purely document-heavy validation models toward structured, risk-driven, evidence-based control. So for global companies, understanding CSA thinking is helpful even when operating under EU GMP.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. The next question is from Henriette. What are the audit requirement guidelines? I'll take this one. That depends on the context, regulatory inspection, internal audit, or supplier audit. If we are talking about computerized system under EU GMP, the key audit requirement guidelines are first the EU GMP Annex 11, which defines expectations for computerized systems, including audit trails, access control, data integrity, and lifecycle documentation. Second, EU GMP Chapter 4, which covers documentation requirements and data integrity principles. And third, the ICH-Q9, quality risk management, because audit expectations are risk-based. So for data integrity specifically, regulators often reference guidance such as the MHRA data integrity guidance, FDA guidance on data integrity, and CSA for US context. If the question is about audit trail requirements specifically, Annex 11 expects audit trails for GMP relevant changes, protection against deletion or modification, defined review procedures, risk-based review frequency, documentation of review. And if we talk about supplier audits, then vendor qualification and oversight must align with GMP expectations and be integrated into the quality system. So there isn't one single audit requirement guideline. It depends on whether you mean regulatory inspection requirements, internal GMP audits, or supplier audits, but all of them are increasingly focused on traceability, risk-based control, and life cycle governance. We also had not a question here from Sneho, but a mention about HVAC and BMS system. Sylvia, can you take this one?
Yeah, sure. That's an important topic. HVAC systems and build management systems, or BMS, are critical because they impact environmental control and therefore product quality. Let's separate the two. First, HVAC. The HVAC system must be qualified because they control temperature, humidity, pressure differentials, and air classification, especially in clean rooms. This falls under equipment and utility qualification, typically aligned with EU GMP Annex 1 for sterile environments, EU GMP Chapter 3 and 5, ISO 14644 for clean room classification. HVAC qualification normally includes design qualification, DQ, installation qualification, IQ, operation qualification, OQ, performance qualification, PQ. Now the BMS. BMS, the Building Management System, is the computerized system that monitors and controls the HVAC. So BMS falls under Annex 11 because it's a computerized system with GMP impact. That means BMS requires risk assessment, define the user requirements, functional testing, access control management, audit trail evaluation, if applicable, change control, periodic review. So in simple terms, HVAC qualified as a critical utility, BMS validated as GMP computerized system controlling that utility. And under the Annex 11 draft direction, lifecycle control becomes even more important because environmental control systems operate continuously. Validation does not stop at go live. You must maintain validated state throughout operation.
Okay. Thank you, Sylvia. The next question is from Michelle. It's an explanation on new section requiring alarms to be added to computerized systems. I can take this one. That's an important point. The draft introduced a stronger and more explicit explanation around alarms in computerized systems. In simple terms, if a system controls or monitors GMP relevant parameters, it must be able to detect and alert when something goes outside predefined limits. So what does that mean? If a system monitors temperature, pressure, critical process parameters, environmental conditions, system failures, data integrity risks, it must generate appropriate alarms when limits are exceeded or when abnormal behavior occurs. But the expectation is not just to have alarms, it's to define which parameters are critical, set justified alarm limits, ensure alarms are reliable, and define how alarms are reviewed and handled, document investigation and response, and very importantly, alarms must not be ignored or systematically overridden. There must be governance around alarm management, and this aligns with broader regulatory direction. If a system has control capability, it must also have monitoring and escalation capability. And from a life cycle perspective, alarm configuration changes must also be controlled under change management. So the expectation is moving from passive monitoring to active detection and documented response. Yeah, so I have here the next question from Julia. Do the proposed Annex 11 changes have the potential to impact organizational structures, responsibilities related to CSV, and how? Can you take this one, Sylvia?
Yeah, sure. Yes, the proposed Annex 11 changes have the potential to impact organizational structures and the responsibilities related to CSV. What we are seeing in the draft is a shift from validation as one-time project activity to validation as part of a continuous lifecycle governance. That means companies may need to rethink roles and accountability. For example, system ownership becomes more formalized. Audit trail review cannot sit informally in IT anymore. QA oversight becomes critical. Vendor and client oversight responsibility must be defined. Cybersecurity and data integrity move closer to the pharmaceutical quality system. So the impact is not just technical, it's organizational. Companies that currently treat CSV as documentation-driven and project-based may need to evolve toward a cross-functional governance model involving QA, IT, engineering, and vendor management with clear RACE definitions. RACE means responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. In short, Annex 11 is reinforcing that responsibility always remains with the manufacturer, and that requires structured digital governance, not just validation documentation. Lillian, are you there? Oh, Lily is frozen. Let me check here.
The trail.
Oh, yeah. Okay, can you repeat, Lillian? I don't know if it's here or if it's there. Can you repeat the question?
Okay. Does it apply for a standalone system without audit trail? I can take this one. It's a great question. Regulators expect traceability for any action that affects GXP data, and audit trail is the way to provide that. So if you are using a standalone system without audit trail, you must both demonstrate alternative controls today and plan to remediate the gap. Concretely, open deviation in our quality system as soon as the final version of Annex 11 comes into force. Do a risk assessment and document how data integrity and traceability are maintained now. Restricted access, segregation of duties, manual logs, independent review, reconciliation, put interim procedure and technical controls in place and document them, who reviews, how often, and how discrepancies are handled. Include a funded and time-bound plan to replace, upgrade, or add audit trail capability to the system with milestones, budget, validation activities, and acceptance criteria. So regulators expect remediation, not indefinite workarounds. Ensure the plan is reflected in your PQS, change control, supplier oversight, validation and qualification plan, and management review. But be ready to show the risk-based justification and timeline during inspection. We have the run of time, so for those whose questions weren't answered, you can schedule a meeting with us to have a one-on-one conversation and receive proper attention. Sylvia, could you close the session?
Yes, of course. I'd like to thank you, my team, for the excellent work. Thank you, Lillian. Thank you for you all being here. And also everyone behind the scenes, Amanda, Gabi, and John. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye and see you next time.